Welcome to Whiskey Wanderlust. I'm Corey. I'm here with Michael Myers of Distillery 291, and he's going to guide us through a tour of his distillery here.
Hard made the Colorado way. So yeah, I'm Michael Myers. I started the distillery in 2011. September 11th changed my life. I lived in New York. I was a fashion beauty photographer, and we moved to Colorado. My ex-wife's parents lived here. I commuted back for photography, got to a point where I was like, I've got to do something different. Read an article in 2010, August 2010, and thought I could brand a whiskey. And then somebody said, why don't you try and make it? And so I'm like, I'm from Georgia. They make it in the woods. How hard can it be? I'm totally self-taught and trained. I built my own still, and my still is built out of photogravure plates. So a photogravure plate is a flat copper plate. You chemically etch an image, you ink the plate, put a piece of paper with it, run it through a press, and you get an inked photograph. So these are photogravures made from the plates that made my first still.
Oh, very cool.
And the first still is now the thump keg of my finished still. The bar is made out of African mahogany, and the profile is like my frames. So a lot of my frames that I made were African mahogany, and has that profile on it. So I decided to make my bar like that. The front of the bar is doors from the Restore. So it's a couple of closet doors on both ends, and then the middle is a mahogany front door. And so these are barrel hoops. I built these as well.
We got a really cool vibe here.
Thank you.
It has kind of a blend of the high-end New York blended with the Western stuff, which I know you're a big fan of, right?
I am.
And I love how it comes together. This is awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bar is a Western bar. There's no seats. I didn't want people that like regulars come in and sit down. It's, again, education. So people are standing here, somebody comes in new, it opens up and people move around, and it makes it a really nice flow. So that's, and Western bars didn't have seats. Most of them, they just had a foot rail.
Okay.
Sam Elliott, who drinks my whiskey on the ranch, Netflix show The Ranch.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So.
And you're acquainted with him, correct?
Dear friends. I've known him for 35 years. So yeah.
Well, he makes the perfect archetype for your whiskey then,
yeah,
right?
He does.
Because he's a good friend, and he's got that Western.
And he likes it. So
that's good.
I shot that photograph 30 something years ago. So this is production area. Cold liquor tank, which is a cold water tank for cooling. Those are the black tanks here. The stainless tank there is a hot liquor tank or a hot water tank. The cold water goes through, cools, comes out warm, goes to the chiller, and goes through the heat exchangers there. So,
and for our audience that may not know the process of distilling, right?
Yeah.
And probably a lot of them don't, right?
Nope, right.
What does that mean to them?
So the pint of beer that you drink, all we're doing is, so that's 16 ounces. We are taking that beer and reducing it to that 1.5 ounce shot.
Okay.
So 10% of that beer.
Right.
And so we're taking water, and because we still distill on the grist, we're taking grain out as well. But you're just taking water and concentrating that beer.
Right.
That's what we're doing.
Okay.
So the way we do that is we create a mash, a wash. And so this has water in it at a certain temp. We put grain in that comes out over there from the mill. And it goes in, and the warm water pulls out the starch of the grain and the malt. There's always got to be some kind of malt or enzymes, and that converts that starch to sugar. We cool it and then pump it over to fermentation tanks. And these are our fermentation tanks. And it goes in here at a certain temperature, cool temperature, and we add yeast. And what happens there is the yeast eats the sugar and creates equal parts CO2 and alcohol. So we started about 1,200 gallons. In 5 to 7 days, it's a 10% beer. The next process to that, and like I said, distill on the grist. So there's grain and there's water and alcohol in here, and yeast. All our still equipment and corn cooker is all fabricated here in the Springs. We buy the tanks, they're Latina tanks out of Italy, buy them from St. Pax in Texas. And then I have a local place here that is a DoD contractor, convert them, turn them into stills for me. So there's a steam coil, everything's steam heated. There's a steam coil in that tank. The column is built here in the Springs. The 2 condensers are Vendome out of Kentucky.
Okay.
Those are the only Vendome things here, and they make great products. I mean,
Yep.
they've been making everybody still for hundreds of years.
So this is the first stage of the distillation process.
It is.
Okay.
So this is a fast process. We're just bringing it up to temperature. We want to boil the alcohol off and some water. So pure ethanol can't carry any flavor. It has to have water with it to carry flavor.
Interesting.
So what we're doing is we're getting rid of the grain, the grist, and some of the excess water.
Okay.
So in that, that pint, we're getting rid of that, but we're not totally getting to the shot.
You're reducing it down a little bit at a time.
Exactly. And this one's quick. We're not trying to refine it too much.
Okay.
That's later
Okay.
in the process. So bring it up to a boil, steam goes up, hits over the swan's neck at a certain temperature, comes into the condenser, condenses back to liquid, and goes in the pipe there into this room. It's a H3 room. So hazardous 3,
Right.
all our high alcohol is dealt with in this room.
Okay.
So we're gonna go that way.
The reason you have that cordoned off is there's safety requirements and all that stuff to deal with the flammable nature of the
Yes.
product and stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Almost everything happens in this room. It's kind of crazy.
This is, so what do you call this room? Magic room then? Or what?
Yeah. The beer in the fermentation comes over, we strip it, it turns into low wines. It's a 70 proof or 35%. It's kind of funky, it's not totally clear. I don't know if you've smelled low wines before.
I don't think so.
It's a little funky, but it smells good.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It has more briny smell to it
Yeah, exactly.
than your final product, obviously, but it still smells good.
yeah, 35%, 275 gallons goes in our 300 gallon finished still. This still was built here in the Springs as well. So those DOD guys, they're like, we'll build you a still. So they took my original still plans, which is the thump keg now on this.
And this is the one that you made from your plates, right?
Photogravure plates, exactly. And they copied my drawings and built me a 300 gallon finishing still. So here we pump this over, the low wines. We bring it up temp slowly because this is where we're really rectifying, really cleaning it. This is a thump keg, not a doubler. A doubler has heat to it. Our thump keg does not have heat. It's just the heat from the steam comes in, builds up enough heat where it steams again, goes up over the swan's neck, makes it to the condenser, and then it comes out into here.
So then all your finished product, you're still using the original handmade still that you did on your own.
Yep.
That's super cool. So talk to me a little bit more about the design. A lot of distillers, they have a particular flavor profile and they're using, they're calculated physics and all that stuff into it. What went into your design?
Being self-taught. I read a lot, and I read different things about the swan's neck and line arm and what angle it should sit at and stuff like that. So I knew I wanted to make a rugged but refined whiskey. So that's where I wanted to do 3 times pot distilled. Okay. So the beer still, the finished still, and the thump keg are 3 different distillations. And then the swan's neck. I built it a certain way so that from what I read about what made it more refined, I designed the swan's neck that way.
Okay.
And then the pot and the column, I just looked at a lot of different stills and decided that I wanted it this way. And I knew how big the copper plates I had, so And
having had your wines, you have a robust flavor to yours. And so was a part of your desire and your research, you wanted a heavier particulate to come out of the distill to make sure you had those heavy notes, or how to tell me about that process?
Yeah, so I wanted it refined, but I did want it rugged. And I actually read about Ben and Jerry's and what they
ice
did.
Cream.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what they did to make their ice cream different back in the day.
Okay.
And so I understood what that was, and I applied that theory to making whiskey.
So it's not just the cool names they come up with.
And so it worked. And
Very cool.
So this was my original still. It had a 10-gallon barrel as its thump keg that I had a manifold built for and everything, and it worked really well. And then when I had this one built, I knew I'd make this the thump keg. And then down the road, The still might get a little bigger, but we'll keep making different thumb kegs, most likely from other photogravure plates that I'll have made, just to keep in line with that. But the photographs that were behind the bar, this one is the one to the right, and it's Jackson Hole.
Yep.
The Tetons are to my back, and you can, if you're close, you can see the tree lines, the dark gray little trees, and there's a fence line that runs here. Photogravures are famous by Edward Curtis, the American West photographer. A lot of Indian photographs and old, turn of the century photographs that were, you see them red, like if you go to Santa Fe, they're all over the place. They have a red tint to them. Okay. Those are all done by photogravures.
Well, I've seen some unique stills, but this has got to be by far the most unique one I've ever seen.
Thank you.
And I think it's a really cool story, and it also hails to your background and what makes your product unique. So I think it's very cool.
Yeah, and so with that, the column is the Chrysler building, the picture that's in the middle in the tasting room. And I decided to roll it on the inside so that it would add more surface area and make the whiskey better, and if not, just add to the story.
Your whiskey literally passes by the Chrysler building every time.
Yep, it does.
That's awesome.
So awesome. You made a good point of, this is my past as a photographer and stuff like that. 291 is the very first photo gallery ever in the world, Gallery 291, Fifth Avenue. Alfred Stieglitz started in 1907. He set out to make, just show photographs, not paintings, together. Before it was a salon and it had paintings and photographs, so he just wanted to show photographs. So that's why he opened the 291. I went to Savannah College of Art and Design, moved into dorm room 291, learned of the gallery.
Interesting.
And like in art history, photo history class the freshman year, and was like, oh, I'm meant to be a photographer. So when it came to this and building the still out of photogravures, and the process of distillation reminds me of the darkroom. So that's where 291 comes from.
And the Savannah, Georgia was complete coincidence at 291.
Yeah. Oh, total. And I still have the key to this day. And I have a picture of the dorm room door.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Here, these are batches. This is bourbon. Oh, yeah, this is small batch bourbon. And what's interesting here, if you want to come look, so those are sticks of aspen or staves, and we finish our aged whiskey on aspen staves. So that's what's happening with this bourbon small batch, is it's sitting here for about 3 weeks with toasted pieces of aspen. I came up with that. Woodford Reserve had done some aging experiment that they released about the same time that I started this. And I didn't know of it, but that was the only time that anybody had really aged whiskey on a different wood. And someone told me about it after I had started aging on aspen, but I wanted aspen on the label for marketing. And,
sure.
And so,
But you also discovered along the way that it actually imparts flavor into the whiskey. Correct?
A little bit, yes.
And I think you've mentioned before that it imparts a certain maple flavor to it.
It's a very slight note. A lot of people think my whiskey tastes like it does because of the aspen. It adds to it, but the shape of the still and the grains I use and everything and the yeast all makes my whiskey taste like it does. So
yeah, very true.
So this is our labeling room and caging. So the bottle gets a cage on the top. We bottle the whiskey and then cork it in there. Guys sit here and put labels on and cork the whiskey. Once a week, we have volunteers come in and do a big batch of it. So
label everything by hand.
Yep, everything by hand. So those are labels.
Well, count us in for some of that sometime. We'd love to come in and help out at some point.
Yeah, we'd love for you to be here. Yeah. You get a bottle and pizza.
Hey, that sounds great.
So yeah.
You do your label printing here, correct, on site?
We do.
That's kind of unique too.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of anybody else doing that.
Letterpress. Well, Maker's Mark does it.
Okay.
And I had been having a letterpress guy in his garage, 2 machines pressing labels. And I say pressing because there's no ink involved. It's a copper plate, heated copper plate process where a foil is pushed into the paper and the heat adheres it to the paper.
Well, they're beautiful bottles.
Thank you.
And look very Colorado Western-esque. So
Yeah,
Good job on that.
and the shape of the bottle, I used to be in the round bottle like Taylor and Stranahan's, and almost everybody uses that bottle. The bottle company that makes this bottle, I was at a trade show, they showed it to me, and I was like, I'd love to have that. You know, can I buy a pallet? And they kind of laughed at me. They're like, you can buy a container. And I was like, well, I was like, how many bottles is in a container? And they're like 30,000. I'm like, oh yeah, right. I'm like selling 5,000 a year right now.
Right.
And so at that time, and finally I got to a point where I could promise over a year I'd buy 30,000 bottles. And
Very
then
cool.
now 66,000, 100,000. What I love about the bottle is my whiskey is very rugged and masculine. The bottle's very feminine. And I like that.
The contrast.
Yeah.
Yes,
exactly.
absolutely. This shows your artistry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Also, the cage comes.
I was going to ask you about that. This is. I haven't seen this on a whiskey bottle ever.
Yeah. So it comes from when I was young. I thought it was an old Western. Found out it was a Little House on the Prairie episode. They're transporting nitroglycerin in a wagon. It's called A Long Hard Day is the episode. And they wire the nitroglycerin in, glass in the wagon so it would just float and not jolt and blow up.
Interesting.
And so I was like, wow, that's cool. I'm making high proof whiskey. Got to wire it.
There you go.
And that's where
awesome.
the cage comes from.
Well, thank you, Michael, for your awesome tour. Way to cap it off with this awesome barrel. If you're in the area in Colorado Springs, they're down off Nevada near Garden of the Gods. Come check them out. Get a spirit and buy a bottle. Right,
Yeah.
Michael?
Perfect.
Thank
you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, same.